All right, so one of the big shows coming out in February on Netflix this coming month is the live-action Avatar series. Now, Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of my favorite animated shows of all time. I love everything about that show. It's been many years since I've watched it. I watched it with my kids. I didn't actually watch it when it first came out, but I watched it when my kids were little, and we all loved it. I love it, and I've loved many shows like it. I loved the Korra series too. I know that's really controversial online, but when I watched it, I hadn't read anything about it being controversial, and I just thought it was an interesting show with great villains, especially. Not as good as Avatar, sure, but some of the storylines in Korra were great, and I like what some of the creators of Avatar have gone on to make the Dragon Prince, and I love the Dragon Prince. It's just my kind of show. Anyways, so they're making a live action adaptation. This always makes me nervous. We have seen some good stuff lately. There have been some good live action adaptations. Netflix has done some impressive stuff lately, both in live action adaptations and animation, with with like One Piece and Blue Eye Samurai, which is fantastic. I hope everyone has watched that. Not a kids show, but really good. But I've been like looking forward to the Avatar live action because it looks good. Like, I mean, like the trailers, it looks good. The casting looks good. The world building, it has a good big production feel to it. Two things have worried me. The lack of a sense of humor. It all looks very serious, but what really made the animated show work, even though it had some serious stuff, and shut my door, had some serious themes and serious episodes, and deeper, more introspective moments. It was a very funny show, and very, it had characters who you really loved and you could really connect with because of their sense of humor, because there was a lot of banter. And all the personalities were so distinct, between Sokka and Aang and so on and so forth. Zuko. But the lack of, so that has worried me, and just the other things worried me is just the general way that so many adaptations are handled in this day and age. Like, I think there's always been a problem with adaptations and with weak writing and with changes that are made to adaptations that don't make sense. Because for whatever reason, instead of just thinking, how can we make this work in this format? Like, what do we need to change from animation to live action? There's all this other stuff that goes into it. Like, how can we change the messaging? And what can we do to change how the fundamental ways characters work? How can we make it less problematic and more in line with today's values? These kind of things tend to ruin adaptations, right? Obviously, sometimes you have to adapt things for modern sensibilities to some degree, or you have to, make some changes based on, if you're translating something from Japanese to English, or from British English to American English, or whatever. There's going to be some changes that have to be made. That everybody understands this, everybody knows this. There's never a 1-to-1 ratio in an adaptation. It's really the philosophy behind it. And what worries me is this new piece. I'm reading Variety right now. This new piece, the headline is Netflix's live-action Avatar series, quote, took out how sexist Sokka was in the original. Quote, a lot of moments in the animated show, quote, were iffy. So, Sokka's character has been made not to be sexist because it was iffy in the original. Here we go. I'm just going to read a little bit. When Avatar: The Last Airbender makes its live-action debut on Netflix next month, Sokka's sexism will be toned down considerably. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, cast members Kiawentio Katara and Ian Owsley, Sokka, informed fans that Sokka's sexism was discussed during the live-action show's development and was deliberately cut away at as it had no place in the new remake. There's more weight with realism in every way, Owsley said, which prompted Kiawentio, I'm probably butchering these names, I apologize, to reveal, I feel like we also took out the elements of how sexist Sokka was. I feel like there were a lot of moments in the original show that were iffy. Yeah, totally, Owsley agreed. There are things that were redirected just because it might play a little differently in live action. As Entertainment Weekly notes, quote, there are entire Reddit threads about Sokka's sexism, discussing how the original Sokka, prior to his character journey, would make remarks like, girls are better at fixing pants than guys, and guys are better at hunting and fighting. And they go on from there for some of the other differences, which they talk about, like how they show the rise of the Fire Nation and the genocide of the Airbenders. And I think those changes sound fine because they're giving us more of the world and the story in a different way. And that's totally cool. And that's why some of the stuff I look forward to, because in the adaptation, I don't want a one-to-one adaptation either. I want to learn new things about this story. I want to see some other things in it, especially if they enrich or expand on the lore. But I don't want to see things like this, where you're taking out Sokka's sexism, because that actually cheapens his character. And there's this line in the quote from Entertainment Weekly where they say, prior to his character journey. Now, see, that's the line right there that makes that really underscores how stupid and ridiculous this decision is on Netflix's part, or on the showrunner and writer's part, for this character, or for any character. If you take out the sexism at the beginning of Sokka's journey, then you don't give him that whole character arc of maturing and becoming a better person during the story. I mean, that's the whole point of having characters with the dynamic character arcs. They grow and change, and they become better people, or they become worse people. It's like if you took Breaking Bad and you just had Walter be a drug dealer from the beginning. That's just not an interesting story, right? If he's already a drug kingpin at the beginning, you lose the whole arc of him breaking bad. If Sokka is not sexist in the beginning of his story here, then he has no room to grow as a person and realize that girls are also awesome, right? And that they're not just good at fixing pants, they can also hunt and fight. That's part of the story. That's what makes it tick. That's what makes it good for everyone who's watching, right? And also, like, look at Zuko. He's a character with a huge character arc. He starts out, spoilers, he starts out as a bad guy. But by the end, he's a good guy, right? He changes. He's like Sorsha in Willow. She's a bad guy in the beginning, but by the end, love and compassion change her into a good guy. Now, if you just make her a good guy from the beginning, you lose the whole arc of Sorsha in Willow. And the same thing with Zuko here. If you just made him a good guy from the beginning, and you took away his pride, and you took away his, he's motivated so much by his feelings of rejection from his father and his feelings of wanting to prove himself and do anything to prove himself, but deep down, heart of gold, baby. But, if you take that out, you lose that arc, you lose so much of what makes the story work. And these things that are iffy, when people describe these things that are iffy, like that's because back in the day, before this madness took over, we realized that flawed people and characters who have problems or bad points of view, but can learn and grow and change, are more interesting than just people who figured it all out already, right? I'm thinking of this great Jack Nicholson movie, As Good as It Gets. It's a great movie because Jack Nicholson's character, well, is hilarious, first of all, but he's an asshole, right? He's very funny, but he's homophobic. He's really sexist. He's extremely self-centered. He's clearly got some OCD and other problems. What makes that movie work so well is that he changes somewhat. Like, he is one of those guys that's like never changed, right? He's very set in his ways. Very problematic person. But because people don't just immediately write him off, because people actually give him a chance, because people are actually, fundamentally good, there's this arc that he goes on. And maybe by the end of it, he's still kind of a jerk, but he's better. He's changed. The change is what makes the story. And the story is nothing without the change. And this worries me about Avatar: The Last Airbender, because, yeah, some of the characters are just fundamentally good from start to finish in every way. Aang goes on a journey. Katara goes on a journey, but those journeys are different from Sokka's or Zuko's. And everyone has their own journey to go on, whether that's building confidence, whether that's finding your place in the world, whatever. But that change, that journey of self is so important and fundamental to any story. And sometimes that means we start with flaws, and those flaws are improved. Sometimes it's the other way, where a good person goes bad. Sometimes it's just not really obvious, and it's changes that aren't necessarily just in one direction or another. Maybe you become more wise. Maybe, whatever. Like, these are just basics of storytelling, and when we see writers in this day and age think that the most important thing is to remove anything problematic rather than to tell a good story, it doesn't do justice to any social justice cause, right? Like, if you want to show why sexism is bad, simply removing anything sexist from any story isn't going to do that. You don't have any lesson anymore. There's no morals. And it's weird because there's this tendency these days to moralize, or to make the message itself the most important part of any kind of writing. But good writing actually contains that message, that moral, inside it. It doesn't throw it in your face. You learn it vis-a-vis the story itself. You see the transformation of the character, and you experience it with them, and thus gain empathy alongside everything else. And it's not just beaten over your head or just whitewashed away. And that's what we see these days. Either we're getting beat over the head with messaging, or problematic and bad things are being whitewashed away. And neither of those things, neither of those approaches actually helps us as people become more empathetic, understanding, compassionate, wise, intelligent, knowledgeable, whatever. Stories are here to help us on our journey also. And if we just sanitize them, or we just turn them into, propaganda, then instead of becoming better people when we consume our media, we just become idiotic consumers. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. This is the way I have spoken, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe. And there's a notification bell. You should hit it. You should definitely hit it. And hit that shit. And I will see you next time. Peace.